If you've watched my video on creating a profile, just some housekeeping items before I go through the bench testing. Okay, so when you do your profile, you'll be in custom setting and increments T+F 1 stop. I then switch. I prefer working in third stops, but you can still work in, full stops if you like. It's just that that will explain how my f-stops look in the benchmark test. Okay. The other thing to keep in mind is as you go through and do your benchmark test, you need to take note of a couple of things. One is when you do your first shot, which I'll explain in a bit, you'll want to do your default profile first. And then once you've done that, you're going to switch to your new profile that you've created. And you're going to do a shot with no exposure compensation. And I always start with incident and then I shift to reflective. And when I do a reflective reading, I'm going to do it on the forehead of the dummy for the highlights and then just to the side for the shadow. And when I take that, I'll just show you, I take a reading, I click on the right hand button here, and that'll give me a reading, okay? And then I click on the memory button here once, and you'll see memory 1 pop up at the top, okay? Then I take my second reading for the shadow, and I click memory button again, okay? And then I'm going to press average to give me the average reading, which is what you're seeing in the photographs, okay? It'll be quite different from this. I've just used a table lamp for this. And then once you've finished that, you will want to clear it for the next shot. So that's spanner down, memory clear, which shows you the two readings you had for highlight and shadow. Say all, okay, and then you're clear for the next shot. Okay, so that's how you take your instant reading, and I'll show you a shot of me doing it. The next thing you want to bear in mind is for the next shot, you're going to increase your exposure compensation for several shots and several compensations to see which one works best for you. And to do that, you've got to remember to do it on both. So on reflective reading, you go to set exposure compensation, then whatever multiples you're choosing. In my example, I was using multiples of 0.4. So I hit 0.4. Okay. Now you can see at the top here, we have 0.4. Now that's 0 plus 0.4. Okay. But when you go into your incident reading, it's not there. So you've got to do it for that one as well. Okay. I've cocked this up so many times. So remember to do it for that one as well. Okay. Now you have 0.4 on both readings. Okay. There. So you have to remember to do that. And that's everything. So just have a play and see what works best for you. Okay, so this is my process. This is after shooting the shot with the profile, but with zero compensation. So once I've done that, I come back and I have to reset everything. So first thing I'm going to do is clear the memory of the two shots I did. So all okay. Next thing I'm going to do is set my next exposure compensation, which is 0.4. Okay. Then I have to do that on it. I did that on reflective. Now I've also got to do it on incident. So set exposure compensation 0.4. Why it doesn't do it all together, I don't know, but there we go. So you've got to do it twice, okay, on both the reflective and the incident. Now I'm going to take the measurement for incident. and we have F7. Okay, and what I'm going to do is set the camera to F7 right here. Make sure it all matches. I don't know if we can see that. Okay, so we've got 13th of a second, F7, and 400 ISO, which matches. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and take the shot. I'm going to put this in here so that I know exactly which shot I've taken. It should just focus, and here we go. Now if I play that back, and I zoom in, I can always tell what it was. We can see that it was plus 0.04, all the correct settings, and the profile. So next, I'm going to switch to reflective and just check that we're on 0.4, which we are. And then I'm going to take the first highlight reading off the square here that I've marked out. Okay, so I'm going to point and use this button to take the reading. And we've got F14, and I'm going to use the right button to store that in memory. And you can see that it's stored in memory 1 now. Now I'm going to take the shadow reading, which is just here by this arrow. We have a reading of F7. Again, I'm going to put that into memory. Okay, and now you see there's 2 in memory. If you wanted to check that, you can go to spanner, down arrow, memory recall, and you can see the 2 readings. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to go to average. We've got F10. So I'm going to set the camera to F10. And I'm going to put this in shot again so we know that's the second shot with the average. And I'm going to take the shot. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this here, go to spanner, down arrow, memory clear. So we've got the 2 readings, but before I clear it, I'm going to take a picture of it. Again, same picture, same reading, so that I've got a record of the two readings of the highlight and the low light. Okay, and that's the sequence. And then just to be belt and braces, so memory clear, all okay. And now, once again, spanner, set exposure. Now we're going to go to 0.8. Okay. Go to instant reading and do the same. 0.8. Okay. Now they're both set and you're ready to go again.
But now I've taken these shots, and if you're with me, you're in Lightroom and you've loaded your shots. And what I did was I took a benchmark test without a profile. You can see that here. There's no profile loaded. So I look at this, and this actually isn't too bad. It's verging on the blowout, but I don't think so. The histogram looks good. I'd only have to bring the highlights down a touch. So it's pretty good for the default profile. So I wouldn't have to play with that too much. So just put that back. Okay. And with this, it was a 6.3. Okay. On the 13th second, 400 ISO. This is the second shot with the average reading of the highlight and shadow. It does tend to always err towards the underexposed to protect the shadows. And then the third shot, obviously I mentioned, this shows you the actual readings just in case for the record. So it's always worth taking that shot. Okay, and this, of course, in this shot, you're seeing the average right here, F11, between those 2 readings. Okay, which is right there. Okay, so then we're switching to the profile that I created. And this is without, so here you can see that the profile is loaded with no exposure compensation. Again, it's not bad. It's a little on the darker side. Wouldn't take much work to lift it up. I could probably just lift the exposure and it would be good. And that's not bad. Lift it a bit more and then lower the highlights that look a little blown. That's not a bad exposure. And this was with the instant reading, remember, which is right here. And you can see that with the instant showing the icon there. So that's not bad. I'm just going to return that to default. Okay, and then this was the average, which is pretty dark. So I'm going to move on to plus 0.4, which seems like a better exposure. A little hot there and a little hot here, but not too much. A little drop of the highlights and we're home. That's pretty good. I quite like that. It's looking a little dark, touch higher on the exposure, and everything looks good. Little bit of blowout there, maybe lower the highlight a bit more. And that's looking pretty good. But here, that's looking nice. I like that. The eyes are looking good. There's no blowout here. That's all looking good. A little dark in this area, but I can live with that. I can lift the shadows here. Quite low on the highlights. I don't like to be that low. But not a bad shot. On the, let's go back and I'm just going to reset that. No, I didn't do much, did I? Okay. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry, I was here, wasn't I? Yeah. Let's return that to normal. Back to 0. Okay. It's weird. Huh, it's weird. Okay, well, moving on, we're going to go to the 0+8, and by the way, you can see that here when we zoom in and it gets its focus. Eventually, there we go. So this is 0+8, and you can see that the instant reading was f6.3, and this is a fairly good, fairly well exposed photo now. It's a little bit hot there, but not much. I'd only have to drop it a touch. Let's go back and see the faces one. So that's a little bit hot. I'd only have to drop the highlight a touch. And I think a little bit more, and we're home. That's all looking good to me. That's a very nice exposure. Assuming, by the way, you've calibrated your screen. If you haven't calibrated your screen, I recommend this video. I'll put a link to that in the display below underneath, so you can go calibrate your screen if you haven't already. Okay, so we're on the +8 here, and it's looking fairly good. Not much adjustment, so I'm fairly happy with that. The spot reading average is a little dark. Let's just lift that and see what happens. Just lifting the exposure a bit here. That's a fairly nice brightness level, but if we go in here, we're a bit hot. I just have to drop the highlight again. And I have to do quite a bit of highlight drop there. It's not bad. And just lift the shadows a bit, punch the white, and that's a fairly nicely exposed. It's a bit hot there on the plant. Okay, I'm now going to switch to, so this is plus 1.2, and that is looking pretty hot. So I'm thinking, drop the highlight right down. That's okay, so that's too hot. All right, so 1.2 is too hot. All right, so I'm thinking plus 8. That's this one that I was playing with. Lift that a bit. I think plus 8 or plus 1 might be my sweet spot. I think I will quite like to work with. I think plus 1 might be the right level. So that's what I'm going to practice with in the real world, and see how that goes, and I'll bring you some examples of what I've been shooting. But that's how I decide on what my exposure compensation is going to be. You may do it differently. I'm just check this. This is on the 0 plus 8. And actually 0 plus 8 might be the sweet spot. I'll drop that, bring that up a bit. Yeah, 0 plus 8 is looking pretty good. Got no burnout here anymore. This is all looking pretty good to me. Could probably even raise the exposure a bit and drop the highlight a bit. Histogram's looking pretty good. Let's have a look at this color checker. That's looking quite nice. Yeah, everything's looking good. It's a touch hot. A touch. I'm going to bring that highlight down a bit, and with gold, I think. That's looking quite nice. Yeah. I'm pretty pleased with that, even on the average. So I'm going to work with, actually I think I'm going to work with 0 plus 0.8 as my working exposure compensation. Okay, so these are the exposure compensation shots I took with flash. I didn't bother with the default profile, so going straight in with my profile at 0 compensation. So we're going to go ahead and look at that. We go to, give me a moment, there we go. Okay, so this is at 0, it's looking a tad dark. Nothing too problematic, and can be saved quite easily. I think just a lift and exposure there. It's a bit much. And drop the highlights. Not a bad shot actually at 0. And this is the average shot, which is going to look quite dark. But again, if I lift that, a lot can be saved. It's still not a bad exposure. It's getting a little bit hot there. This plant's looking good. It's probably more to do with my separate exposures. The shadows there. Darken the shadows there. Drop the whites a little, the highlights. That's not bad. I'm having to push the exposure quite high to achieve that. So this is at 0.4. Oh, sorry, this is the average. We're going to hop up now to 0.4. And this looks like a better exposure. Not much I'd have to do with that. Lift it up a bit. Maybe a bit higher. And then Let me turn the highlights down. It's coming quite low on that. And that's looking pretty good. Let's lift the shadows for the eyes there a bit. That's looking pretty good. I kind of like 0.4 on this one. But let's just look at the average. Yeah, it's fairly dark. Lift exposure. Whoa! Easy there, cowboy. And drop the highlights a bit. But still, all of these are within range. I'm not having to do too much on this one. Let's hop up to 0.8. I'm just going to check that it was on 0.8 there. Yeah, okay. And this is a nicely exposed shot. I like 0.8. There's virtually nothing I have to do to this. It's a tad hot there. I'm going to drop the highlight a bit, but I quite like this. That's nice. I can lift the exposure for the... Actually, no, I'll leave the exposure where it is. I've dropped for the highlight there. That looks nice. I can just lift the shadows some. And although that does start to show the background mesh on the back, it's not too bad. Yeah, I kind of like this. Is all really nice. So I think I might. It's sort of in between 0.4. Just check that was correctly exposed. Yeah. So I think it's a bit between 0.4 with a bit of adjustment and 0.8 with virtually no adjustment. I think 0.8 is my sweet spot, which is also what I decided on the continuous light. So I think 0.8 is my sweet spot all around. So I'm going to go with that. For flash and for continuous, and I'm set. I'm done. Great. Well, I hope that's helped. I hope that's given you some idea of how I arrive at my exposure compensation, and I hope it's helped you. Okay, that's it. Hope you enjoy, and maybe you could pop along and see my Instagram and see what shots I've been taking with my profiles. All right. By the way, it is at With It Films for Instagram. You don't have to follow. It's an open account, so you can browse without following. No problem at all. All right. Happy capturing.